Okay friends, it's time to get started on our job. Something that I want you to think about is we're going to be having to remove the air intake system from right up top here, so you're going to want to make sure that you have the gaskets for that as well. With that said, let's continue on by removing this cover right here. We're going to go ahead and remove these two bolts. Let's grab this, we'll lift it straight up, remove it from the vehicle. Now let's remove the oil dipstick. Go ahead and check that out. We'll wipe it off, set it aside as well. Now the next thing we're going to do is remove this hose right here from the valve cover. Just going to squeeze on this clamp. We'll lift it right on up. Grab onto that hose, give it a little wiggle. Pull that off of there. Whenever you remove a hose, you always want to give it a couple little squeezes. Just make sure it's nice, soft, and pliable, and it's not torn or worn in any way. We'll go ahead and set this one aside. Now we can make our way over to the other side. You're going to find an electrical connector right here. For this, there's a little squeeze tab that's located on the inner side right here. I'm just going to squeeze on that with my index finger, and I'll press this down. Whenever you remove an electrical connector, inspect it. If you see any funny colors, it's corrosion and it needs to be dealt with. That looks fine, so we can set that aside as well. Let's move along to this hose right here. Squeeze that clamp, we'll slide this down. Give that hose a little wiggle. You want to be very careful not to break this sensor. Just going to see if I can pop it down off of there. Sometimes these can be difficult to get off. Now we can move along to removing our air inlet tube. It comes all the way across from here to there. To do that, I'm going to use an 8mm. I'll loosen up this clamp. Come over to this side. We'll loosen up this clamp as well. This clamp's messed up. Now that it's nice and loose, let's go ahead and grab onto it. We're going to give it a little wiggle. Start removing it from the throttle body here. Now if you feel like you need a little bit more room, you can just go ahead and pull this thing right out of the way. To do that, I would come right over here, squeeze on this, and that's what we'll do. There's a little clamp. Try to grab it from this side. Pull that off of there. Now we can grab onto this. We'll set this aside. Now we can move along to removing all 4 of our 8mm bolts that hold the throttle body to the intake. Go ahead and grab onto that throttle body. We'll just gently pull this away. And that exposes this bolt right under here. Now on the other side of the engine, we're going to look along the back side of the intake here. You're going to find another hose that leads onto it with a clamp. Go ahead and squeeze the clamp, slide it out of the way, and then remove the hose from the back of the intake. See if I can get this under here. Inspect that hose. Set it aside. Once the hose is off, let's continue on to removing this bolt right here using a 12mm. Now that we have this bolt out of here, let's use a 10mm socket to remove this bolt right there and then the bracket. Set this aside. Now down along the front side of the manifold here, you're going to find 5 10mm mounting bolts. One here, one up in there, in the center, and then the same on the other side. Let's start removing them all. All right, now that we have all those bolts out, we can go ahead and grab onto this, and we're going to lift it up and out of here. Set this aside. Okay, so now the process for any of these is going to be all the same, so I'm just going to show you on the one that's easiest to see, which is right here. To do this, what I would want to do is just grab onto this tab right in the center right there. We'll press down on that. Once it feels as though it's unlocked, we can go ahead and remove this from the coil. This in there, give it a little wiggle. Inspect it, of course. This looks good. Set it aside. Use a 10mm socket to remove the mounting bolt. Go ahead and grab onto that coil. We're going to give it a little twist and lift it up. Let's go ahead and spray a little bit of compressed air inside this hole. Just essentially want to make sure there's no debris in there. Now we can continue on with the 9/16 spark plug socket. Go ahead and put it right in here. Turn this counterclockwise to remove it. Okay, so now before we go ahead and put in our brand new spark plug, let's just take a quick look at it in comparison to the original. You want to make sure that the gap is approximately the same, and of course the gap wasn't actually compressed during shipping on this. If you look at it, you can see that the electrode isn't touching up against the ground strap. Overall, it looks like it's in very good condition, so we're ready for our install. To install this, we're just going to go ahead and insert it into the spark plug socket. Make sure it's secure so it can't fall down and potentially break itself. Let's slide it down in here, and now we'll just go ahead and bottom it out by hand. Once you have it bottomed out, let's go ahead and torque this to 14 foot-pounds. A little closer. We're just compressing that gasket here. There we are. All right, now we can take our coil. We're going to go ahead and slide it right in here. This should slide right onto the spark plug. We'll slide it down. Line up your bolt hole on the backside there. We can snug that up. Bottom it out. Once it's snugged, go ahead and torque it to 50 inch-pounds. Go ahead and plug it in. There we are. Make sure it's secure. The process will be the same for all. Now we can go ahead and put our intake in here. Let's carefully slide it down and underneath the fuel rail here. Want to be very careful not to knock any of your gaskets off. Bring this down and get it into position here. There we are. Now the next thing we're going to do is start putting in all of our mounting bolts that come across here. Once they're all started, we'll start snugging them up and torquing them, but it needs to be done in a specific sequence, so let's go ahead and do it step by step. To start them in, you can start with pretty much any one you want. Now, once you have them all started, let's go ahead and bottom them out. And this is where the specific order comes in. So we'll start in the center. The next thing we're going to do is come up to this one up here. this one right over here. On the far corner on the driver's side. And then the same on the passenger side. Now that we have them all bottomed out, let's go ahead and torque these in the same exact order as we just went ahead and snugged them. We'll start in the center. When we torque these, we're going to torque them to 20 foot-pounds. And now we'll just come right back to the center for good measure. Perfect. Now at this point, we're ready to start putting this bracket back on here. Just take it, slide it right in underneath this area here. There we are. Now we can put our bottom bolt in. Make sure that hole's still lined up. Yep, that looks good. Just double check to make sure that your hole's lined up for the bolt there. Let's go ahead and snug this now. Once you have that one tight, let's go ahead and put in this bolt as well. Just gotta get this lined up. Snug this as well. Make sure that's nice and tight. Now we can reconnect this hose right here. Just go ahead and grab onto that clamp. We'll get it slid down into position on the hose. Slide the hose onto the PCV valve right there. Push it down as far as it can go. Try to put your clamp back exactly where you removed it from. Make sure that's nice and secure. Make sure this is into its mounting point right here as well. Now we can do this hose that comes along the back side of the intake here. Slide that on as far as it can go. And then just go ahead and put the clamp into position. Come on, pliers. Make sure that's secure as well. Now let's make our way over to the driver's side of the intake. We'll put in this bracket bolt as well. Yeah, right, I'm thinking this, there we go. Now let's go ahead and start lining up our throttle body with its mounting holes here. We'll start in all 4 of our mounting bolts. Once they're put in, we'll go ahead and bottom them out and then torque these to 7 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and plug this in. Listen for a click. Give it a tug. Make sure it's secure. Get the hose on there. Slide it all the way up as far as it can go. Put our clamp into position. Now we can start putting our air inlet tube on here. Let's start with this right here. Just go ahead and press it right in there. We'll clamp this later. Now at this point, we're going to start sliding the rest of this into position. Just get it down in behind here. There we are. We'll get this lined up as well. Start putting it onto the throttle body. Now we can do this other hose. Now sometimes this can be a tight fit, so you're going to have to do a little bit of struggling, but overall you should be able to do it. Try to get that bottom part on there. Now we'll just slide this right on. You should see where it wants to fit on. It has kind of like a little dimple here and one over there. It kind of fits around this area. Now we'll just make sure that the clamp is in position. Okay, just double check, feeling all the way around this hose. You want to make sure that it's secure all the way around here and over on the throttle body. This is super important. If you have any dirty or unmetered air coming into the engine, you're going to have a check engine light and a running condition. Make sure that's on there. All right, let's tighten the clamps. Make sure everything's nice and secure. Let's go ahead and put on this clamp. Now we've got this little vent hose right here. Let's just put this up and over and latch it in. All right, so now it's going to be time to put our engine cover on. But before we do that, just take a quick look. Double check that you connected all of your hoses that you might have disconnected and any electrical wiring along the way. This looks great, so while we start putting this on here, we're going to look for these tabs that come up along the cover. Those tabs need to line up with their corresponding holes that are on the intake right here. Let's go ahead and line them up. We'll press this down, latch it in, and then put in both of our mounting bolts. One here, one right there. Make sure it's secure. Lastly, it's time to put in our dipstick right here. Go ahead and slide it right in there. Make sure it's all the way down so no moisture can make its way into the dipstick tube. Okay friends, we got the car all put together. What's left to do now? Now you're going to want to go ahead and start up the vehicle, let it run for a minute. You want to make sure that you don't have a running condition, such as maybe a misfire of some sort, and also make sure you don't have a check engine light. Other than that, take it for a road test. Thanks.